So in closing, let me invite you to zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger moment of transformation that we happen to be in from a systems point of view. And I want to invite you to, think about systems thinking in really simple terms, which is, using this device, our smartphone, as a metaphor. There are two things we do with our smartphones, which is loading an app or upgrading the operating system. Loading an app gives us new skills, right? We can do new things. Upgrading the operating system allows us to work with all the apps in a different way. So systems change always deals with the latter. It has to do with upgrading the operating system. It has to do with vertical development, not just horizontal development. And in society, of course, it's not enough to plug in, accept, and then unplug. But each upgrade of the operating system is the result of a huge effort, right? That involves many players in society, which takes years, often decades, or even longer. And that's what we are in the midst of course. And that's why uLab really is part of a movement building process towards upgrading our operating system. So what are we talking about? When you, for example, look at health and learning, right? There's two sectors we are all quite familiar with. 1.0, which is, by which I mean input and authority-centric models. In health is doctor-centric, in learning is traditional teacher-centric ways of learning. That's pretty much the past. And today, the mainstream really is 2.0. Output and efficiency-centric. So evidence-based medicine and testing-driven teaching, right? Teaching for testing. Is that real learning? Of course, it's not. And that brings us to 3.0, which is outcome and user-centric. So here now we talk about patient-centric medicine. We reorganize the healthcare system around the patient journey, basically, and learner-centric or student-centric ways of organizing a school. You could say the good healthcare system or the good school. Is that the future? I don't think so, because I think the future will move towards yet another operating system that we refer to as regenerative and ecosystem-centric. In health, that would mean moving away from just addressing symptoms of pathology towards strengthening the sources of health and of well-being. Think about, for example, the social determinants of health, which really broaden the whole intervention spectrum of how we think about transforming health systems. And whole person. And so in the learning space, we move away from traditional curriculum designs towards whole person, whole systems, patterns, or architectures of learning, integrating head, heart, and hand, and also integrating, embedding the learning process in the community, in all the change initiatives that are happening around us. Farm and food, traditional, 2.0 is industrial agriculture, monocultures, you could say the source, the mother of most of our environmental problems. Then 3.0, organic agriculture, reduce the negative footprint. That's better. So no pesticides, no herbicides, but still, it's just a transitional state, we believe. And 4.0, regenerative agriculture, by which we mean food as medium for healing planet and people. So that's what we see happening and beginning in many of the communities, and many of the uLab 2X processes have been actually focusing on that. Finance, from traditional to extractive capital, think Wall Street, right? By which we mean externality blind, basically. To today, impact investing, right? So we have some externality awareness, ESG being an example for that, But what we believe is that the future really is in regenerative finance, which is focusing on transforming systems and on full externality awareness, that we really are aware of the whole system and its evolution and not just on single variables or single impact areas. And then, all of that, of course, is embedded in the evolution of governance, right? At the end of the day, in a modern society, everything deals with the evolution of governance. What do we see there? If you double click on that, from the visible hand, 1.0, right, hierarchy and government, you could say, to the invisible hand, the power of markets, a much more decentralized way of organizing. So number 3, organized interest groups, right, that happen to evolve and shift the regulatory framework, right? That's partly positive, partly we have all these special interest groups which are causing so much trouble today. So that's why we believe these 3 old mechanisms are not enough. And what we need today is a 4th mechanism that we refer to as ABC, awareness-based collective action, by which we mean bringing together all the key stakeholders, using a disciplined approach of deep sense-making, applying systems thinking in context, and identifying prototypes that kind of, if scaled, could really transform the system towards strengthening the regenerative capacity and the well-being of all. Lastly, the paradigm of development. All of this is embedded in how we think as a civilization about development, right? Economic, but also societal development. And 1.0, what was that, right? Well, from a Western perspective, we would say, let's say Western economic perspective, I would say mercantilism, right? It's basically hoarding gold reserves, right? That's what it used to be. The hoarding is still there, right? Kind of today it's with vaccines, obviously, right? But, of course, as an, development pattern, we have moved beyond. So the main paradigm today in development is still what we have as 2.0 here, GDP, right? Economic output as the number 1 metrics for measuring economic progress. But we all know that's not good enough. It's often misleading, in fact, particularly in the case of developed countries. So that's why 1990, if we fast forward a little bit, the UNDP pioneered HDI, the Human Development Index, as a new metric that is really focusing around human well-being, right? That's blending and moving away from merely GDP. And the 4.0 is, and that's pretty much where we are today. If you look at the UNDP Development Report 2020, last December, which begins to yet bring in another shift in how we measure economic progress from merely human well-being to human and planetary well-being. So that's pretty much where we are, right? When you look at this matrix, where's the old mainstream? It's here. Where's that old mainstream moving slowly towards pockets of 3.0? Where are the innovators, right? Many of us, maybe in this, we have been in this space, the 3.0, right, over the past few decades. And now really our challenge is how to pioneer new pathways to move into a 4.0. And that's pretty much the context, I think, in which transformation today and in this decade is taking place. So I started with asking the question, what does it take to lead in the face of disruption? And what I share with you is what it takes is both an outer journey and an inner journey, and that the inner journey has to do with these capacities, opening the mind, opening the heart, and opening the will. And in closing, right, if that's what we try to do, planetary healing and civilizational renewal, right, we live in a moment where one civilization is dying, the one that's creating all these divides, and another one, maybe with our help, is being born. If that's kind of what we are working on in terms of the bigger picture, we believe the only way of doing that is by doing this, activating generative social fields. Like you can see in this image here, which is actually a uLab team, right? In Sao Paulo that, together with colleagues in the favelas kind of are co-initiating a process. It's a 2X team. Activating generative social fields across very diverse settings of stakeholders. And the only way, that is what we learned over the past 2 decades, the only way of doing that is if you have a support structure. That's what we call School for Transformation. And uLab, right, is the first component of that School for Transformation. But what we really have in mind is to build out that school to a much larger level of relevance and scale so that it can capacitate the level of activating generative and regenerative social fields to the degree that the current crisis and the current moment of disruption that we live in right now is inviting us to wake up to and to live up to.